Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and today we're going to talk about the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, or Pentecost that they say, and the reason why it is called that way in English is because like the Pentagon, maybe obviously we're more familiar with that pent word, it's five-sided. That's the Pentagon, and therefore that there's the 5 books of Moses, meaning the Torah was given to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai on this holiday of Shavuot. Now Shavuot is 49, or actually the 50th day. We count 49 days, and on the 50th day that God appeared to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. And we want to talk about the giving of the Torah in that sense, and today we'll also like to talk about the truth of the Torah. Was it really a real happening? So it's a very interesting subject, but we'll start with just the basic Judaism, like I always like doing. You get the basics before we go deeper into it. Jewish people they came out of Egypt, that's the Exodus story, just 49 days, 7 weeks later, and they were trying to prepare themselves for the giving of the Torah. And they were expecting this. They knew that to get out of Egypt, as they say, well, we're free, now we can do what we want. Well, a lot of times that is what freedom means to people, but that's not the Jewish idea. Yes, you're free from being oppressed, and now you have to learn the Torah, and you have to do the commandments by God, which of course, on one hand, you could say, well, what kind of freedom is that? You go from one servitude to another. But it's interesting, it's a deep concept in its own right, because the Talmud says the only free person is the person who learns the Torah, which you can maybe think that it's a contradiction. We just said it's not easy to learn Torah. It's a servitude in its own right, and the commandments, there's so many commandments. You eat kosher, don't eat this. There's the Sabbath, don't work, and et cetera, et cetera. We know there's so many commandments throughout the Jewish year and the Jewish day that, what kind of freedom is that? It's like I say, there's a big burden, and it truly is on one hand. These things cost, these things you have to do, this is effort, et cetera, really. And how does that mean you're free? Well, it's an interesting example, but what does really freedom means? Is free. I can eat as much candy as I want. So, well, in a way, you're kind of addicted to candy. I could do whatever I want. Well, kind of you're going to go along to whatever your natural feelings are. True freedom is that you can express your true self, your inside of yourself, where your neshama, it's called in Hebrew, which is your soul. And that releases you to a higher level. And that's what true freedom is. It's not I can sit around and watch TV and eat as much as I want and see I'm free to do what I want. It's a day off, I'm free to do nothing. Well, what true freedom is to truly find freedom inside of yourself, to express your true self. So that's what the Torah and the mitzvahs, the Jewish people were looking forward to the giving of the Torah, and they did receive the Torah, the 10 Commandments. Now, these 10 Commandments, it's also a very interesting concept in its own right, because you see, well, you're going to have God speak to you. Well, let's frame the situation. You got out of Egypt, you're expecting to receive the Torah, and you do receive it. God's there at Mount Sinai, Har Sinai in Hebrew, and there's lightnings, and there's thunders, and it's really the biggest show on earth, to tell you the honest truth. It never was before, never will be. And all the Jewish people are standing around the mountain waiting for the big news. So what do we see in the 10 Commandments? It's not the biggest news in the world. Some of the commandments are very, very simple. Don't kill, don't steal. That's not any big news. They knew that before. A human being naturally even knows that. You don't need God to tell you don't kill people. You can figure it out for yourself. Any person who's an atheist will say, oh, I don't like this. God, 10 Commandments. It says don't kill, don't steal. Not like other commandments, being Jewish, but who's going to argue about don't kill, don't steal? And any normal human being understands that's a normal idea. But what's the interesting with the interest is in these 10 Commandments, even though many of them are very simple. others are not, but some are very simple, so to speak. Don't kill and don't steal is surely two of them. Nevertheless, that you should be able to understand that these are God-given. The reason why you do them is because God wants you to do them, and this infuses even your most simple everyday life with God-given commandments. For example, no one has to tell you to eat. That's, again, it's obvious and it's simple. But but when you keep kosher, then that's especially a God-given commandment. You're eating specially. So there are different functions. Don't kill, don't steal. These are different commandments. But once you're not killing, steal, why? Not because I think it's good or I like it. It's only normal for society to have these commandments. The other, you're coming down to a level that I'm doing it because God told me to. So therefore, everything we do, even the most simple things in life, are all God-given. And the Jewish people received these 10 commandments and at Mount Sinai, and they were all one. They were all together, which, they always tell a little bit of a joke. It's not so nice, but it says you have two Jews, you have three opinions. But that shows on intellectual ideas also. You're supposed to think for yourself, and if you think for yourself, you're going to have a different idea than somebody else. But here they were all on one page. They were ready to receive the Torah, and they did receive it at Mount Sinai. But that's a major idea. And now I want to get a deeper idea. We're making a story out of it. I mean, it was a real issue. But that itself is a question that unfortunately even many Jewish people have and philosophize against it. Was the Torah really given from God to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai? Obviously it's a book, it's handed down to us, and there's manuscripts hundreds of years old. That doesn't mean God wrote it. It says God wrote it, God gave it, that's what it says, but maybe man made it up. You can make up anything. You can write about anything. So this is the argument that I wanted to bring out to you. It's a very, very beautiful idea. It's Kuzari. What's Kuzari? This is hundreds and hundreds of years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, that we see that the modern world, modern thousands of years ago compared to thousands of years ago, were ready to give up their idols. People believed in, you can go to the museum here, even can go into Albany, Capital District, and they were bowing down to images of cats and all kinds of lions' heads. You see these statues that they were bowing down to idols. Well, we have progressed since then. It's been a few thousand years, and people were more looking into the Judaic idea. Christianity, of course, has taken upon themselves Old Testament, and Muslims also, Islam has also taken upon themselves the Old Testament, and they're refining the idea surely compared to the idol worshiping that was going on beforehand. So tune that in. So now this Kuzari, it was like 1,000 years ago, and there's many different religions in the world. Mainly there's the big three. Of course I know in the Far East there's differently, but in the big three in the Western world of obviously Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He didn't know which way to go. He didn't know how to go away from his idols. People were turning off from it, obviously. People were turned off thousands of years ago and removed themselves from these ideas, and they came to a more refined idea. But he didn't know which one to go to. So he asked the rabbis. He says, you say you're right. Everybody says we're the truth. That's no news. Go to every religion to say we're the right one. Why do you say we're the truth? He says, well, what does it say in the Torah? It says, why do we hold by the Torah? And what we just were talking about, God gave us the commandments at Mount Sinai. Well, how do you know it's the true? It's a nice story, like we just said, but say God gave it. So who's to say? So the answer is, and this is a very interesting idea, it says that there were 600,000 men, besides women and children, which means 2 to 3 million people. This is the story at Mount Sinai. It wasn't two people, it wasn't only Moses. Everybody heard God at Mount Sinai. They all heard it equally. And like we say before, that people are different thinking. Actually, it's a Gemara, it's a Talmud that says every single person thinks differently than anybody else. No two people think exactly the same. No two people have the same emotions and characters as anybody else. So again, people argue, and people are nice, they're tough, they're stupid, they're smart. We all know there's totally different kind of people in the world and all around us. So they're all listening to the same thing. They all heard the same thing. Now you're trying to transmit this idea. I mean, saying go the opposite way. Go saying that it wasn't true. Wouldn't it be the Kuzari, this is interesting, it's a very logical idea. Wouldn't there be some sect or some faction somewhere in history? Because what does it say? Your father's father's father heard this. You could ask your father, your grandfather, and he says, yeah, I heard it from my grandfather, and he said he heard it from my grandfather that this was true. So people would say, what are you telling me my father heard it? Someone's going to say, my grandfather never heard, I never heard of such a story in my whole life. This is impossible, it's incredible, no, I never heard about it. It's just a big fiction that was made up. I mean, if that would be, surely there would be people screaming. You can have 10 people in cahoots with each other, 50 people, 100 people. Yes, this person's the greatest in the world, but there's always going to be somebody else saying, no, it's not true. It's all made up. It's a hocus pocus. And surely there's going to be people making such a broad statement. Your father's father heard the Torah, the 10 Commandments from God. I never heard of such a stupid, crazy story in my whole life. And what are you telling me? Don't tell me that. So you can fool 10 people, like they always say, you can fool some of the people some of the time. You're not going to fool all the people all the time. And even though there's so much Bible criticism throughout the ages, truth is, you can look in the ancient books and in the Talmud itself, people were arguing, I don't believe it, it's not right, that no one ever said it's not true. I heard from my grandfather, he never told me such a crazy story. God talked to the Jewish people. Doesn't make sense. I never heard of it. But it never happened that way. There's no sect, and there's surely enough divergent sects and people in the world, and they don't believe in the Bible. They would love to see the Bible be criticized and be knocked down. But no one ever said that they never heard that anciently. So again, it's a logic. Let me bring it down. Maybe when this is what I was telling you was the Kuzari. Bring it down to even more practical ideas. Everybody's in the United States, and you say, who was the first president of the United States? George Washington. Oh, really? Who says? There's 7 billion people on the face of the earth. Can you bring me even one witness out of 7 billion people that saw and knew about George Washington, that he was the first president? Well, obviously, you say, no, it was 200 years ago. No one's 200 years old. That's ridiculous over here. I can't bring you a witness. So why do you believe it? Show me if you have a number of people. We saw him. I was there. No one could bring you that witness. So why do you believe George Washington was the first president? And the answer is simply, it's just because everybody said it. Your grandfather's a grandfather. Now we're not talking thousands of years ago. We're talking 200 years ago. And there's no sect in America that says, I was there, and I was in the Deep South, and I was in Virginia, and I never heard of such a crazy thing. He wasn't. It's just a made-up story that these Americans made up some story about this guy called George Washington, and he's the first president. Well, obviously you would have a lot of people screaming that way. They would say, what are you telling us this baloney for over here? This is ridiculous. But if nobody says that, then you got to take it as truth. And even though you have no witnesses about it, there's no tape recordings, there's no photographs, but that's the way. You ever heard a person says, oh, they taught me about George Washington? I don't believe it. No such a thing. I bet you it's not true that George Washington was the first president of the United States. Whoever talks that way, ever heard of somebody like that? Maybe the loony bin or something like that, but a normal human being? No one says that. So, meaning it's accepted as absolute truth that George Washington, yes, was the first president. No one says not. It must be. It was handed down. There were thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans at that time, or people around the world who knew that the headlines, George Washington, the first United States president, And nobody in Europe and nobody in America ever says this thing is baloney, is full of, full of crock. It doesn't mean anything. So we take it as true. It's true. George Wendell. So it's the same logic, even though it goes thousands of years earlier, of course, 3,300 years ago. But again, if no one's saying that shows that the Torah was indeed given by God to the Jewish people, because there's just no other group that, and like I say, not everybody's friendly, that would love to knock and criticize Bible and criticize the Jewish people. You don't know what you're talking about. But no one ever says such a thing in their lives. And therefore, we have to accept it as true. And that means, what does that mean to you? That God gave to the Jewish people and gave to humanity these commandments, and they're God-given. They're not just man-made. And that's a major idea also. It's not just theologically, there's God or not God, but it means a lot, because if God-given, that's the way it is. He's absolute truth, he's absolute good, and that's the best way. But once you start fooling around saying, well, it's man-made, then you could say, well, man, for example, you have the biggest genius in the world, even today. Could they say that in 500 years what life's going to be? They actually, the New York Times did that, and then around the turn of the last century, meaning around 1900, they asked people what would life look like in 100 years, and obviously, we can look back and see if it's true or not, look around us, and nobody got it right. So even 100 years, people just don't understand. They didn't understand computers and iPads and this and planes and flying around, etc. We know what life is today, and no one got it right even 100 years ago. So you can be the biggest genius in the world, but if you're going to say 100, 500 years from now exactly what life is, you're not going to get it right. Therefore, then you conclude, well, if it's only man, and maybe Moses was a great lawgiver and he was a genius and beautiful. On the other hand, he couldn't figure out. There's no way he knew what life would be in the 21st century. And therefore, we better tune it up to the 21st century, all these laws. So that's what you're going to get as a practical difference. On the other hand, if you believe that God gave the Torah, well, God knew what's going to happen in the 21st century. God knows the past, present, and future. And to say like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know what's going to happen with all these computers and et cetera, and what life would be, and all the modern trends, if they're modern, or they're ancient trends that are in different civilizations, people try to do things against the Torah, then maybe, that God didn't know what's happening. What does that mean, God didn't know the future? By definition, God does know the future. He knew exactly what our life would be, and he gave the Torah fitting to it. And the truth is, like we all say when we're talking about, I guess this comes out to the idea that we're trying to talk about truth, that we actually can talk about that is what is truth in philosophy. For an example would be communism. And I remember, of course, I tell everybody, I'm 29 years old, don't look at my white beard so much. But in any case, I've been around, and we all know communism fell apart in 1990. And I remember when we were students in the 1970s, and communism was going full blast. It was in Russia, it was a strong country, and it was almost equal in the United States, a big fight. No one wanted a fight between the two. They weren't wimps, and they were going strong and taking over the world, in different countries, here and there, in Vietnam, even beforehand, or spreading around. He says, well, what's the truth? He says, I remember I had a friend who talked to me about that. He says, if you would read the communist constitution, it's better than the United States. Freedom of religion, freedom of this, freedom of that. It sounds beautiful. Unfortunately, that's why a lot of people got taken up in it. Everybody's equal, it's utopia, it's the best thing in the world. And a lot of people got caught up in this distorted philosophy. It wasn't distorted, it sounded nice. We can argue with it. Everybody's equal, freedom of this, sounds good. But again, obviously we all know what communism really was, and I would say was because it doesn't exist anymore. Even the Chinese are the biggest capitalists in the world, that it doesn't exist. And we knew what kind of prison camp, when we were cared about Soviet Jewry, but everybody knew it was a prison camp, and people only had enough vodka and bread to filled their bellies, compared to what United States was and is, what the freedoms we have here, compared to that communist prison camp. So you can talk all you want and make all these kind of highfalutin ideas, but the truth is, maybe it's like I said, it's good to think, but if it doesn't come out to actuality, if you can't, it's not real, then you're dreaming. It's just nice dreams. You can fantasize everybody's equal and everybody's good and this. You can think what you want. It's a nice dream, but we're talking reality. Can you live a life on that philosophy? Back to Judaism again. Like I said, there's a lot of hard things to do. And granted, things cost money and difficulties here and there. Let's be honest about it. On the other hand, is it practical? Can you overcome the difficulties? Can you live a life with the Torah and its commandments? And yes, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people do. A lot of people don't amongst the Jewish people, but that doesn't preclude the idea that many, many, many people do live that life, have beautiful lives, have happy lives, and even though overcoming all the obstacles, if you want to say that, the difficulties of the Torah and the mitzvahs. But again, if you're happy doing something, this we were talking about freedom before, that certain things are tough. If you want to accomplish something, things are tough. You could say, why should a person go to college, for example? This is, well, number one, it costs money. Number two, you know how tough it is. You have finals and studying, etc., etc. Hey, man, you could just sit in the street and just, do half nothing, have some little job, and not go to college. Why would anybody want to go to college and, go through this hassle? Money, like we said, and studying and finals. It's all very, very difficult. But some people would, hopefully people would answer, hey, I want to do it because I love learning, or I know in the future I'm going to get a better job from it. These should be the two answers why some people go because my parents told me so. But all right, we'll talk about that another time. But really, I love learning. So it's difficult, but you like doing it. You want to do it for a higher purpose. I'm going to get a better job, or because I just love learning. And even though it's difficult, but it's better than sitting around on a street corner doing nothing. I'd rather learn than to do nothing. So this is the same idea with Judaism. Really, again, let's be honest about it. It's money, it's the trouble. People have difficulties in their lives. It's not easy to be a Torah and mitzvahs Jew, even in Israel, let alone in America. There are difficulties involved. But on the other hand, like we say, in any good thing in the life, you want to overcome these difficulties and do the right thing and the good thing. And that's what it takes. It's something tough. A person goes to the army, for example, has to go through basic training. And they say, well, what are you making the guy do some push-ups? You're punishing the guy that he signed up as a volunteer army, and you're almost torturing him. The guy who doesn't go to the army doesn't have to do all these push-ups and etc., all the obstacle courses. And the guy who's a nice American has to go through basic training and be yelled at from the sergeant, and we all know what life is in basic training. Why? Well, they're trying to make a person better. They're trying to make you into a soldier. So again, point is if you want something good in life, you have to work for it. And it's the same thing really with Judaism. Torah and mitzvahs were given to the Jewish people, and instead of a burden, it really is it's a merit. It's a special merit to be able to do what God wants from you if you think it in that way. And like in anything, or I could say, again, going to use an army example, again, person's a Green Beret or a SEAL. You read these stories, you read the description, what these guys have to go through, just to, again, you almost would call it torture in a certain sense, to be these kind of soldiers. So why would anybody want to sign up for it? But of course, people do, and they understand. When you become a Green Beret, you become a SEAL, you're proud, you made it. Yeah, it was difficult, and you didn't have to volunteer for the Army or Navy, and you didn't have to volunteer to be a Green Beret or a SEAL. So why, again, you're doing it? But you're special, and those people are privileged to do those kind of jobs. It's the same I just want to bring out to you, just because people think, oh, it's tough and it's hard. Well, a lot of things in life are harsh and tough. But again, if you want to do something special, you're going to have to do a little bit extra, or sometimes a lot more extra, in order to achieve what you want to achieve. So in any case, this is the idea of the Torah and the mitzvahs. It was given a Torah, to sum up, and we were given this privilege, again, expectantly. Again, that's what I said at the beginning of the show, that people looking forward to it, not like, oh man, what do you want me to do now? You say, well, I'm happy to be at this level. I'm great to be privileged to do these kind of things, and I'm going to grow. And we should have that feeling too. The Torah, it says, is very, very interesting. We talked on a mystical idea. Of course, almost basically you can understand God's beyond time. He's past, present, and future like one. And it's the same thing for his Torah, his Judaism that he gave over, that it's past, present, and future. So it's a very, very deep and beautiful idea that the Torah was given today, now. You say that in Hebrew in a way that when you say the blessing over the Torah, you say, people who have aliyahs, they go to synagogue, or you see kids that go to temple. One of the blessings is, blessed are you, God, no saying. It didn't say who gave the Torah. The translation, who is giving presently the Torah, because again, God gave it, we could say 3,300 years ago, that's when the story happened. But on the other hand, it was happening to us even now in the present state, that we're getting the Torah. And again, we're trying to bring out that it's relevant for every person, no matter who they are. You could say, well, nothing's relevant to every person. Someone likes a bestseller, I don't like it. That's the best record, I don't like it, or another person doesn't like it. There's no music, there's no book that everybody in the world is going to like. So how can you say that the Torah everybody likes is talking to every person? We said before, everybody's different, totally different than each other. But on the other hand, again, we're dealing with God. He's above time, he's above place, he's totally infinite. And because it's an infinity, that God could actually, the Almighty can talk in his Torah to every single person. So when you read the Torah and you're reading the Bible, that it's a message to you, and it goes beyond your thinking. So, well, this is the bestseller in the world. Billions of people throughout history, millions and billions of people have read the Bible. It's not a book written to me. Your grandmother, your bubby writes you a letter, it's for you, or something your teacher writes on an assignment, it's for you or your parent. But here, this is nothing to do specifically with me. It's with billions, he's talking to billions of people. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an infinite Almighty who's infinite Torah that can talk to every single person individually, and that's why that a person can take it relevant to themselves and their lives, to whomever they are. We said every person thinks differently, everybody feels differently, everybody has a different job and a function in the world, and that's important for every single person. So again, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a deeper appreciation of the Jewish holiday Shavuot, the anniversary when the Torah was given, and make it relevant to every person. Thank you very much.